This story is technically my mum's, but it somewhat affected my siblings and me as well, so I want to share it. So my mum grew up in South Florida, and this started during the early 70s. She was a senior in high school, and she met a guy at a wedding. He was the drummer in the wedding band, a few years older than her, and therefore he was cool, a mysterious guy that many girls her age dreamed of. They immediately hit it off, and he actually commented on her saddle shoes that she was wearing at the time. She gave him her phone number, and I believe they maybe went out to 1 or 2 dates or something, and everything seemed totally fine. He would regularly call the house, and she would sit at the kitchen floor and talk to him, and one night their phone conversation just took a really weird turn. He started asking her things like, "Have you ever thought about killing yourself, and do you ever think about murdering people?" Obviously, she was shocked at this and got very uncomfortable and completely stopped talking to him. And this is the last that she heard from him, or so she thought. It was 2012, and I had just graduated from college. I was hanging out in my college town to finish out my lease and work and figure out my next move. My mum calls me and says that something weird has been going on. She tells me that she received a letter from this man that she knew in high school. I had no idea about this guy at the time, and she had never mentioned him at all to me, my siblings, or even my dad. She explains to me who this man is and how she knew him, but hadn't spoken to him since that one uncomfortable phone call. The letter said something like, "I see you're really happy and married with kids," etc. But he goes on to mention each of us by name. He also mentions my dad's name and even where he works. Now, my parents met in college in another state completely. They quickly married, graduated college, and moved to yet another state, and then another state once my 2 sisters were born. So she had no idea how he knew that they were married and the names and address of everyone, and she has never been on social media, and once she had all of us kids, she even stopped working. I mean, if you were to Google her name, you wouldn't find a thing. She then recalls getting a phone call from the Alumni Association at her college, telling her that a man had been calling on and off for months trying to get her contact information, but they weren't allowed to give out that information. She then tells me his name, and I actually remember having a Facebook friend request and a Twitter follow request from this man. My siblings all had them as well. My mum, having no social media though, like I mentioned, asked me to see if I could dig around his social media accounts and see what I could find. I found a music MySpace and a Reverb Nation page of some really terrible music that he had recorded and uploaded. And one of the songs was called Victoria, which is her name, and all of the other songs had seemingly normal titles like Summer's Day, etc. I tell my mum this, and she freaks out. I send her the link, and it's hard to make out the lyrics because the quality is so bad, but he mentions her saddle shoes, her beauty, etc. They literally hung out twice, 40 years ago, and these were songs that had been recorded pretty recently. I dig a little deeper, and I find out that he's made a website dedicated to freeing Amanda Knox, the woman accused of murdering her roommate in Italy. This was super alarming at the time, but I've since not put too much weight on that since their innocence is actually very possible. But it was still all very just strange. My dad didn't seem fazed by any of this, but my mum was freaked out and wouldn't stay home alone since this man knows their address. She ends up telling all of this to a family friend who is actually a private investigator, and he decides to do some digging on this guy. Now, first of all, he's changed his last name. Secondly, he's moved to about 5 different states in the last 20 years, all under different aliases and working completely different jobs. There wasn't much that could be done since he never actually threatened my mum and he somehow didn't have a record. He still pops up every now and then with friend requests to my siblings and me, but other than that, no one knows what his deal is. The fact that he's moved around quite a lot and even changed his name is definitely a red flag though. I personally think this dude is a serial killer or something, and if he's not, then he's just a very sad and lonely and mentally unstable man, and I really hope that he gets the help that he needs. But something just tells me in my gut that this guy is dangerous. I've been living with my fiancé in his childhood home for about 7 years now and have never experienced anything even remotely paranormal during this time. He has been here for almost 30 years and has also never experienced anything either, so this sudden occurrence of paranormal activity is even more off-putting, simply because it seemingly is the first evidence in the house for at least 60 years plus, since it's been in his family. Anyway, this took place on Thursday morning, right before 3 a.m. when we were watching a movie in the bedroom. We have 2 dogs in the house, a red-nosed pit bull who is male and a boxer pit bull mix who is female, just in case anyone was wondering. And before we heard anything, both of our dogs' heckles went up, and Rick, the pit bull, started making a really low or whining growl noise, which that alone was enough to get me pretty spooked. Needless to say, we were both concerned and immediately paused the movie to see if we could hear anything or something, or try to discern what had our pups so agitated. But we didn't hear anything. So my fiancé gets up to go and check out the rest of the house, and as he approached the door to the bedroom, both dogs jumped up and started barking at the door, heckles still raised, and just behaving in a way that we had honestly never seen before. Now we're both pretty freaked out, and my fiancé retrieves his gun from the nightstand and starts to leave the bedroom, telling me to stay with the dogs and not to come out until he says so. But as soon as he opens the bedroom door, we hear a loud bang coming from the kitchen. Now, the layout of this house is that the bedroom is literally almost right off the dining room, which is connected to the kitchen through an open archway slightly bigger than a normal-sized doorway, not even 15 feet from where the bedroom door is. So the kitchen is just merely steps away once he left the bedroom. So he rushes out the door and goes to investigate the banging, and I hear him stop dead in his tracks, just short of the kitchen, and he says, "What the hell? Emily?" And I heard the genuine fear in his voice, which I am honestly not used to at all, and started to panic, getting myself out of bed and running after him. The dogs now were both on the floor barking after me, but refusing to leave the room. When I leave the bedroom, the banging sound is much clearer now, and I realize that it's the sound of several cupboards in the kitchen, all opening and slamming shut repeatedly, and I know this house well enough to know the distinct sound the cupboards make when opened or closed, so I was certain that that was it. I just see my fiancé standing in the dining room staring into the kitchen with absolutely no colour in his face, with his mouth just hanging open, and as I reach him and look into the kitchen, I actually saw all of the cupboards above the sink, 4 of them to be precise, 2 larger ones on each side and 2 smaller ones in the middle, slammed shut on their own before it all just stopped as quickly as it started. We both were pretty much stuck there in just complete shock, trying to piece together what the hell just happened, because I can't begin to think of any logical explanation for it, and neither can he. I mean, we're the only 2 people in this house, and we were both in another room when the slamming started, and my fiancé is still a good 7 feet away from the closet or the cupboard when I saw all 4 simultaneously slam shut. So there was absolutely no human interference with the cupboards in any way. After the slamming stopped, our dogs ran out of the bedroom finally and stood behind my fiancé, just barking and whining, still acting weird, but they at least left the bedroom, and they would not go into the kitchen. They didn't for the rest of the night, in fact, even after everything had finally stopped. And the final incident that happened was while we were both just standing there staring into the kitchen. Our little clock radio that we have on the counter turned on by itself on full volume. Mind you, we never have the volume that high, and there are never any alarms set on it or anything like that. It has no remote activation of any kind as well. I mean, it's just a clock radio from the 90s. Anyway, so that's my experience, everyone, and I apologize for my poor storytelling or any other issues with me telling this, but I just had to get this off my chest because it's been really bothering me, and I have no idea what to do about this, if there even is anything to be done about it. I've never really dealt with anything like this, besides loving horror movies and ghost stories, I suppose. I just never thought that I'd have one of my own, and now that I do, I kind of wish that I didn't. Thank you also to anyone who's listening to this, and if anyone has any advice, I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. So I live in rural northwest England, and about 40 minutes drive from me is a place called the Trough of Bowland. It's basically country lanes that wind on for miles and miles in the middle of nowhere. You can Google it if you want. It's actually a lovely place to visit, with places that you can stop by, little streams, and have picnics and paddle in the stream and whatnot. I've been going with my family pretty much ever since I can remember, in fact. So, when I was about 6, we had been for a day out, as it was a nice summer's day, and we had a good day having a picnic and playing in the streams, etc. And there was me, my brother, the same age as me, my older brother, who would have been about 15 at the time, I think, and Dad and stepmom. We had been out all day, and it was late evening when we decided to set off back home. As you can imagine, too, the roads are pitch black at night time, being in the middle of nowhere, all national speed limit, 60 miles per hour. So we're just driving along, me and my brothers in the back, my dad driving and my stepmom in the passenger seat, when suddenly my mum shouted, "What's that?" And my dad did a full-on emergency stop as if we were going to hit something, as we all looked up to see a woman in a grey-white dress step out onto the road as the car was screeching to a stop. We actually didn't stop in time, but as we collided with her, a white mist just drifted across the bonnet of the car before just disappearing. This obviously left us all more puzzled than scared, and we all still remember it now, even 12 years on. But that's not the only freaky experience that we've had in that area, because about 2 years ago, when I was 16, me and my brother and our girlfriends took a drive over there in my brother's car. We were on a relatively straight bit of the road, and my brother knows the roads really well, so we were going at the speed limit, when suddenly I saw out of my window a girl dressed in all white. It was enough for me to tell my brother to stop, and I made him reverse back to where I had seen this girl, and when we did, there was nobody there. He wound his window down and called out into the darkness, but there was nothing. It was incredibly freaky, though, and we still talk about it every time we go over that way. I am 18 now, and I still remember both of those experiences vividly, and get goosebumps when talking about them with pretty much anyone. So I've been listening to and reading people's personal ghost stories, and recently it kind of got me thinking about some of the creepiest stories that I've heard from friends and family, and I thought that I would share them here. So, the first one came from a very good friend of mine. They had a nephew who was maybe 5 years old when this happened, and she still lived with her parents in a very small house. So, when her nephew stayed over, he had to share her bed. Now, she woke up in the middle of the night on one occasion to find him sitting upright in bed, shivering and sweating. When she asked him what was wrong, he told her that he was scared of the man in the corner of the room. She followed his gaze, but the corner he was looking at was far too dark to see anything. In an effort to calm him down, she turned on her bedside lamp and showed him that there was nothing there. But even with the light on, her nephew just continued to shake and said that the man wouldn't leave. Needless to say, she took him downstairs and they slept on the sofas for the rest of the night. The second one, we were discussing ghosts at work once when a co-worker actually told me a story that really gave me the chills. Her bedroom was on the ground floor of her house. It was supposed to be the dining room, and her younger daughter had the master bedroom upstairs. She was a single mum, so she slept alone. And one night, she woke up to her daughter's footsteps leaving the upstairs bedroom and crossing the landing, then come downstairs and along the hall. The downstairs bedroom door creaked open, and my co-worker sat up to ask her daughter if she was okay, assuming that she just had a nightmare or something. But there was nobody standing in the doorway, and it was then that she realized that her daughter wasn't home because she was staying at her dad's all weekend. The third and final story was another old friend of mine had divorced parents and lived with her mum. When she would go and see her dad on the weekends, I would go with her sometimes too. Her dad once told us a story about how, a year after his mum, my friend's Nan, had passed away, his girlfriend took him out for dinner to try and take his mind off of the anniversary. When they got home after midnight, they found that their bedroom had been ransacked, but not by a burglar, because nothing was missing and their flat hadn't been broken into, but things were just in a real general disarray. For instance, the girlfriend's hairdryer was plugged into the wall and was pulled across the floor as far as the cord would go. But the weirdest of all was that my friend's dad's alarm clock on his bedside table had stopped at roughly 11:30 p.m., the time of day that his mum had passed away a year earlier. So a couple of months ago, I shared here about different experiences that my sons have had in their rooms. Finally, I myself had an experience, and that was what prompted me to share my story here. It got a bit of attention, and I received some good advice from some people here, so I thought that I would type an update. The last story left off immediately after my own experience. I was rattled and confused about the glowing eyes that I saw in my oldest son's room, so I took action. My sons went to spend the weekend at their grandparents' house. My husband went to work the night shift, and I braced myself. That night I went upstairs and I took a look around before I went to bed. I made sure to mark my territory by walking into every room, making around and saying out loud, "This is my house and this is my son's room. You don't live here anymore." Now, some of you would clearly advise against this since I didn't know what the hell was up there, or if it was even aggressive, but I didn't have sage to burn or time to call in a clairvoyant or anything. I had 2 days till my boys would come home, and that was it. That night, as I went to bed, I turned a little light on in my room, and I was trying not to seem scared, but man, the darkness at this point was oppressive. I laid down in bed, and immediately the light blew up. It smelled horrible, and I was in complete darkness. I jumped out of bed and turned on the ceiling lamp, and it blew out too. So I did what any rational person would do. I freaked out and yelled things like, "So you're going to blow up every lamp in my house? What then? I'm not going anywhere." I marched upstairs in the light of my phone's flashlight and repeated my "this is my house" chant a couple of times, until I calmed down and started to wonder what the hell is up. My guess is that this thing knew what my intentions were and was actually pissed that my sons weren't in the house, so it took it out on me. I went downstairs thinking that I'm going to be alone in this house until 7:30 in the morning. Shivering at this point, I went into the bedroom to change the light bulbs when I heard the piano in the living room. Just a frustrated smack on the keys and then silence. And after that, the house was quiet for the rest of the night. Actually, for the rest of the weekend. We still have experiences, but a lot less than before. The kids stay in their rooms and beds most nights, and they aren't that scared anymore. I still prance around upstairs once a day, telling this thing to leave my house. It seems to be a game of stubbornness at this point, I think. But anyway, I just would like to say a big thank you to all of the people that gave me advice on the last time I told the story. I'll see how this goes, and if anything changes, I'll let you guys know. G'day mates, it's Busta here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you would like to help me out, then please go ahead and watch another video by clicking on a card on the screen. As always guys, thanks for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one.